black identity. But if you check out the majority, they're only using these words falsely. Because the first thing that is a shame, African people with European name. That is the first step we had to take to correct a prehistoric mistake. If you hear Sicharan, Ramkela, Wan, Lalchan, Balchan, well, bet your life dies a East Indian man, Jose Juan Gonzalez, Manuel Sancho Pablo. You sure them fellas from Mexico? So why my name couldn't be Dinkaka, Lumumba, Makiba, or Kenyatta? If we use these names, then we sure to be on the stairway to true black identity. If you retrace your steps from the start, you find names play an important part. For if you did some great thing in history, they might want to record your activity. But if you name Hodgkinson or Graham, no one could tell that you were a black man. So this is why it's an important factor to use the names of your African ancestors. Siran, Biran, Ola, Behab, Baba, or Mustafa. Well, you sure them fellas come from Arabia. Rommel, Calten, Bruno, Adolf, Bichhofen, von Eichmann. Well, bet you hand them boys is German. So why your name couldn't be Mobutu? Kasavubu, Gowado, Chuku. Change your name from George Weeks to Wakamba, so we could know that you're serious about black power. Now, no African should be reluctant to pass this on to his descendants. These names that you so dearly consider belonging to the white slave master. You lost your name, and this you must know. In the slave trade many years ago, and these present names you must understand, you're contributing to slave time tradition. Nam Fong Chow Chan and Tang Si Tong Wang, you look long pingly. Well then you sure them fellas is Chinese. Vladimir Kosygin, Khrushchev, Mikoyan, Kowalski. Well them is Russian men naturally. So why my name couldn't be Danjuma, Tafawa, Lumumba, or Nkrumah? Change your name from chalk dust to pygmy bus, so we could know that you're really Afro-conscious. Now some people walk around in Ashiki, some preach Ashanti, some Swahili, while others think a bracelet of silver creates reflections of Africa. Yet when they die, you watch on the tombstone. It's Patterson, Hudson, Jackson, Calhoun. That is counterfeit identity. These people must be lost in holy street. The fact remains that 10 Hindu out of every 20 could still talk at least a little bit of Hindi, and also 29 out of every 30 Chinese could speak the language most fluently. Then why my people can't do the same? If we really want back the name, then the white man will stand by and let you pass. And he gonna say the black man gets serious at last. understand you're contributing to slave time tradition. Nam fong chow chan in tang si tong wang you look long pingly. Well then you show them fellas is Chinese. Vladimir Kosygin, Khrushchev, Mikoyan, Kowalski. Well them is Russian men naturally. So why my name couldn't be Danjuma? Tafawa, Lumumba, and Puma. Change your name from chalk dust to pygmy bus, so we could know that you really Afro-conscious. Now some people walk around with that shit. Some preach Ashanti, some Swahili, while others think a bracelet of silver creates reflections of Africa. Yet when they die, you watch on the tombstone. It's Patterson, Hudson, Jackson, Calhoun. That is counterfeit identity. These people must be lost in Holy Street. The fact remains that 10 Hindu out of every 20 could still talk at least a little bit of Hindi, and also 29 out of every 30 Chinese could speak the language most fluently. Then why my people can't do the same? If we really want back the name, then the white man will stand by and let you pass. And he gonna say the black man gets serious at last.
Oh yes, black man gets serious at last. Getting serious at last. Black identity, there by the mighty maestro, black identity. We are on a mission. We are on a mission with this identity thing. Identity means what you identify with. Are you going to be identifying with Africa, your African self, or are you identifying with something else? Are you identifying with Negro, or are you identifying with Africa? African identity. African identity. Good evening to all of you, and welcome to Politics 101. It's Wednesday night, our midweek edition. We're going to be talking something a little bit different tonight. We're going to be talking about health, the challenges to the healthcare system in Guyana. You know, the government like to talk about hospital building and all this story. You know, they like to have buildings. But we're going to be looking at the healthcare system in Guyana, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the health problems we have in our country, and we will get to the teacher strike, because tomorrow, Thursday, there is a demonstration in front of the Ministry of Education called by the GTU and the GTUC. Lincoln Lewis is going to join us towards the end of the program. But our main guest tonight is a young man, Colin Haynes. He's part Buxtonian, part Linden, but all Buxtonian. Colin Haynes, those of you from Buxton, the Barkers, them Barker from, well, first of all, we're going to know them from Friendship back down side. But then they moved to the roadside, Friendship Middlewalk Road Head. Miss Barker, he's Miss Barker's grandson, Colin Haynes. And he's joining me tonight to talk about the healthcare system in Guyana, the challenges to healthcare in Guyana. He's an international health and healthcare IT consultant. You all hear that? Big title. International Health and Healthcare IT consultant. You hear that? You all not a country by, but you hear big title. We got the younger generation ready to take over and run things. He dabbled in politics. He was an AFCY. I don't know. I don't know where he is now. I may try to recruit him. I may try to recruit him. You never know. You never know. He's a boxing boy. He's a boxing boy. Welcome to all of you. If you're joining us from Linden, welcome to you. Welcome to you. Linden is a special place. The conglomeration of what is all going. A little bit of boxing and the rest of the East Coast. A little bit of West Coast. Plenty West Bobbies. That's what Linden make up of, you know? Potpourri. A cook up. A cook up. A cook up. With plenty. Get a little tripe inside. Pigtail. Sal beef. You know, the works. All the obstacles. All the obstacles. That's what Linden is. A good cook up. And, you know, we just do the split peas cook up, the black eye cook up, the chana cook up, the pigeon peas. I ain't eat a pigeon peas cook up since I come. And remind myself I got to talk to the people who just help me cook. That my next cook up must be a pigeon peas cook up. And then you know we get the okra cook up, and then you get the kalaglu cook up, and then my auntie used to cook a pumpkin cook up, and then you get the shine rice. You get the shine rice, and then you get it mix up. I just tried a little bit of chana, a little bit of black eye, because it's cook up. It's cook up. And Linden, to all you Linden cook up people, welcome, welcome, welcome to all you Buxtonians. And I see plenty of you all here tonight. Is a son of Buxton going to be here talking tonight. Little boy, young boy, not little boy is them short tail. People cross up is a young boy from the young generation, and he gonna be here talking tonight. Black identity. We start off with Maestro. Unfortunately, died early. One of the early exponents of what we come to know as soca, the soul of Calypso. He and Rash Shorty I. Maestro died tragically. Came out one night. He on the highway, saw somebody at a flat, came out to help them, and then a car come and knock you down. I mean, it was such a tragic, and to someone at he live would have threatened the mighty Sparrow for the title of the greatest Calypsonian, leading us off tonight with Black Identity. Please share the link. Please share the link. Share the link and let everyone know we're going to be talking health and politics tonight. Health and politics tonight. So share the link doing just now. Here's a little piece of Black Identity.
An African historian noted both the importance of African Liberation Day in terms of our African identity and some of the root causes for our problem of identification.
I have met brothers and sisters who say that their mother tongue, quote unquote, is French, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, as well as English, which we speak. And because of this, we have a problem of identification. We do not know whom we are. And that is why this gathering is of great symbolic importance, because it is an act of identification. We are saying that we identify with the African people of the African continent. We are saying that we are an African people. And when we make this identification, have no illusions about the fact that this is a very revolutionary initiative. It is a rejection of every other form of identification which the white society has asked us to accept. Let me draw your attention to something which white universities and white libraries practice. And this is a university community. Numerous universities lie around this land. You go into their libraries and check the Library of Congress cards. Under Europe or European, you will find all entries listed concerning the continent of Europe. You will also find entries listed about Europeans in East Africa, Europeans in North Africa, Europeans in Asia and Australia. Look under the Chinese, you will find entries listed not only for mainland China, but for Malaysia and for the Chinese in North America. But look on the Africa and the Africans, the only entries on the Africans relate to the continent itself. There are no entries on the Africans overseas. There is no such category. Africans who have been raped from the continent mysteriously disappear and become Negroes.
Yeah, yes. That is worth another listen.
Sisters,
In terms of our African identification.
I have met brothers and sisters who say that their mother tongue, quote unquote, is French, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, as well as English, which we speak. And because of this, we have a problem of identification. We do not know whom we are. And that is why this gathering is of great symbolic importance, because it is an act of identification. We are saying that we identify with the African people of the African continent. We are saying that we are an African people. And when we make this identification, have no illusions about the fact that this is a very revolutionary initiative. It is a rejection of every other form of identification which the white society has asked us to accept. Let me draw your attention to something which white universities and white libraries practice. And this is a university community. Numerous universities lie around this land. You go into their libraries and check the Library of Congress cards. Under Europe or European, you will find all entries listed concerning the continent of Europe. You will also find entries listed about Europeans in East Africa, Europeans in North Africa, Europeans in Asia and Australia. Look under the Chinese, you will find entries listed not only for mainland China, but for Malaysia and for the Chinese in North America. But look on the Africa and the Africans, the only entries on the Africans relate to the continent itself. There are no entries on the Africans overseas. There is no such category. Africans who have been raped from the continent mysteriously disappear and become Negroes.
And become Negro. Well, we laying down the gauntlet here in Guyana. No more Negro. No more Negro. We are an African people. The voice, the thesis, the image of our own Walter Rodney, Dr. Walter Rodney, speaking there in Berkeley, California, on the question of African identity. And I don't have to introduce him. It's rolling out here. How Europe underdeveloped Africa, groundings with my brothers, history of the Guyanese working people. Our own Walter Rodney dealing with that word Negro. We ain't plain. No more Negro. We are an African people. We are an African people. Sisters and brothers, tonight we're going to be talking with a young man, and we're going to be talking about the healthcare system in Guyana. We'll be talking with Colin Haynes. He's part Linden, part Buxton, all Buxton. And for you Buxtonians, he's Colin Haynes Barker, Miss Barker grandson. His mother is Vesta my classmate. I know Ali auntie them. We get one uncle. You know Ali auntie them because, as you all know in Buxton, everybody know everybody and so on. And so he is all Buxtonians, the Barkers. So let me bring in my guest and let's start the conversation rolling. Colin Haynes Barker. Good evening, my brother.
Good evening, Dr. Haynes. How are you doing?
I am surviving by God's grace and the grace of the ancestors.
Amen.
And I am not a Negro. I'm African. And I know you ain't no Negro.
Yeah, I am. I'm really excited. I'm actually very happy to be on the show. And thank you for the shout out. Like I said, my roots is in Buxton. I cut my teeth in on Friendship Public Road there. So it's a place that I spent a lot of time, a lot of holiday in Buxton, with the guinea tree climbing and my cousins in the yard and my grandmother. There was so much of us. She used to be just calling us by any name. She would call me Dwight, and then she'd call Dwight my name, and so forth. So yeah, it's really good. And as you said, I'm a Lindoner, so I'm also proud of my Linden heritage. When people, I meet a lot of people. I travel around the U.S. and they tell me, they're from GT or they're from Georgetown, and I said, no, 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 I'm from Linden. So I'm really proud of where I'm from. I'm a Lindoner, and I'm proud of that. Proud to be here.
Yes, and it's my pleasure to talk to you. I've been threatening to do this for a long time. And
Yes.
eventually you and I traveled into Guyana 2 weeks ago.
Yes, yes.
You were in first class. I was in.
Oh, why you have to bust my bubble like that, Doc? You put me on the spot there, man.
No, teacher, your mother and your auntie and them and your grandmother ever tell you about Teacher George?
No, I never heard about Teacher George.
George Young, he was a Proverbs man in boxing. Teacher George, you talk in Proverbs. And if you tell Teacher George, Miss Barker grandson, me travel with him, he sit on first class, he will say, bye. I want eagle in the ground dove. You're eagle, you fly high. You are not a ground dove. You are an eagle. And you deserve that. Where your mother could sit down, your father could sit down, you sit down now. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. Colin, I read out your title, and we people like title, International Health and Healthcare IT Consultant. Them big man in Boston and Linden would say, you hear title there by, you hear my title there, big long like from here till for catch quarantine. And if you not look sharp, as Teacher George used to say, when you teach a Cane Grove, you left Boston and you ride, you bicycle, you gonna Cane Grove, you teach. When you go up afternoon, you're hungry, so you ride fast. For me, Tom, he said, here, me was such a fast ride man that if me not start pulling my brakes at Golden Grove, me fly past Boston at the Morocco River, me go end up with the speed with which me go. And your title long. If we not careful, he land from here till quarantine, and if we not draw the brakes by New Amsterdam, a title go till over Suriname, cross the quarantine river.
I hope it's not that long. Well, it's just a fancy title to say I'm a healthcare consultant, and I've worked in the healthcare field both internationally and also not only public health, because health has different facets, right? And even if you're in public health, you have the international piece where you work with countries and you work in international development. And then there's the IT piece where you work with healthcare systems and fashioning technical systems and that kind of thing, and supporting and do training and so forth. So yeah, it's I've been able to juggle those two over the years. But international health is really my passion, or global health as they call it, and that's my passion. And
how did you become interested in that area of work?
Well, for me, healthcare is personal. My uncle Seymour, all right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Right. And he had got sick and he passed away with HIV a few years ago. And I said that this was a defining moment, just not because of the pain and suffering you also see, but it was a disease that I was curious about. And at the time, it was killing a lot of people. And so I wanted to be able to to understand about it, and also to find ways in how we can curb that in Guyana. And so even when I went to school of public health, I went to school in California at Loma Linda. I studied everything I could about HIV, did research. I even studied Guyana healthcare system at that time, and just try to figure out how now I'm going to link the two together. And even my dissertation, my thesis was on HIV in Guyana as well. So it was personal for me. And look at it, we've come along with HIV in Guyana as well. It's gotten to the point where we've got it under control pretty much. So for me, it's personal. And you know my uncle as well.
Yes, I know your uncle. I
Mm.
say you had one uncle. I was only talking about the one that are alive.
One alive,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I know your uncle Simo quite well. He is one that buys them that had bicycle first in Boston.
Yes.
Very few people that get bicycle. He, Peter Pata, and Nigel Miller, them buy a bicycle because their family and
Mm,
thing, send
mm.
bicycle, send money, and so on. So I know your uncle quite well, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
And thing. You said that we have HIV under control in Guyana, and I suppose in the rest of the world, and that is quite an achievement. Expand on that a little, because
Mhm.
thank God there is not the same kind of stigma
Right,
that there is to people who are living with HIV.
right.
But people are living longer. They're
Yeah,
living relatively normal lives and
correct.
so forth. What do you attribute the advances that we have made in that area to?
Yeah, so it's a combination of a few things. So first of all, in the 2000s, I mean, HIV is a relatively new disease, right? 1988, 1980s, I think the first case in Ghana was 88. And so, uh, in the initial part in the 90s and even in the early 2000s, it was something that was relatively unknown. We didn't know how to treat it. Many people thought, when you get HIV, it's a death sentence. You're going to die. And over the years, thanks to technology once, where, you have now high powered medication. Another thing has been is, and I always say one of the most successful programs in history of global health is what's called PEPFAR, the President's Emergency and Preparedness Fund for HIV/AIDS, right, reduction. And so George Bush at the time came up with this fund that he can, route funds in the form of drugs and funding for countries, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, because those were the two regions where HIV was wiping people out, right? And so with that came medication, came funding for programs, and so we were able to bring it from the point where people were dying with HIV. They can have their medications, they can take the triplet pill. And then we also note that HIV as well, there's some people who, so there's about three different kinds of people. So they're the people who take no drugs with HIV, right? They have a low, what's called viral load. So you measure how much HIV you have by viral load. So you
Mhm.
don't die from AIDS. When you get AIDS, AIDS is the metamorphosis, or it's the change of the disease, right? But HIV is the virus, all right? And over a period of time, that virus, right? So let me say this: HIV doesn't kill you, but AIDS will kill you, because it's the metamorphosis of it when it breaks down your immune system, right? That's when now you're susceptible. So what these drugs did was it reduced the ability for your immune system to continually be attacked. Then you had people who just had a low viral load. All they had to do was come to clinic often, take their checkups, eat healthy, and all of that, and they live. I mean, I knew a lady when I did my thesis. She was about 20 years into HIV, and she was an older woman, and she used to come to clinic. I used to see her come to clinic every couple of weeks, and she survived. And then you have those people midway where their viral loads are somewhat manageable, but they still need to use that medication to keep it in check, right? And so because of those partnerships with AIDS Relief, Catholic Relief Services, PEPFAR, CDC, all of that, we were able to keep it under control in Guyana. And then over in the late 2000s, maybe let's say 2010 to 2020, where we are now, we see the HIV now is moving to a special population of people like commercial sex workers, men who have sex with men. And so my project, we were actually targeting them. And then there's the mental health component of it, where support groups, because when people get diseases, one of the things we never thought about, I never even thought about this years ago, 10 years ago, when over 10 years ago, I have my, I went to school, I got my MPH, is the mental health aspect of when you actually have a disease. Because there's a saying that if most people didn't have doubt or worry, there won't be anybody in the hospital. Sometimes it's the worry and the doubt people have about the disease that keeps them sick, because the body now reacts to that stress. So that was a thing that we investigate as well. And so, like I said, it was a sort of a multi-sectoral, multinational approach to reducing HIV. And we've got the numbers down in Latin America. We've got the numbers down in Africa, thanks to these investments we've made. And also, a lot of good work was done by organizations. I mean, we talk about this, higher level government, international organization, but a lot of low level organizations, a lot of NGOs put their feet, their necks to the wheel, put their foot to the wheel, and they worked and they developed, and they went and do HIV testing. They did condom distribution. They did condom demonstration. They did life skills training. So HIV has taken up a whole program. So the whole thing is now more holistic to target your well-being.
In case you're just joining us, we are talking tonight with young healthcare specialist Colin Haynes, originally from Linden via Buxton, and lots of Buxtonians. I see a lot of you here tonight. And of course, Buxton, like all our villages, are very tribal. The Buxtonians have a special tribalism that comes from legend,
When people stop train.
Yes, when you take it out of my mouth. When you grow up as a little boy and you hear Buxton, people stop train, you tell yourself that you're special, and so you develop that sense of self and sense of being. And when people ask me, well, what makes Buxton special? I usually say to them, Buxtonians are people like any other village. There's nothing special about Buxtonian. What is unique about Buxtonians is this legend of fearsomeness, of militancy. If you knock one, you knock all, and they don't care if you're big and strong, they're coming and they're fighting. It's something that passed from generation to generation, and each generation feels that it has to carry that legacy forward. And so with everything that has to do with socialization, after a time it almost become like if it's biology, that there is some special thing in the Buxtonian blood, as they say, if you drink company water, you're a Buxtonian. So it is in the water. And if your mother drink the water, you ain't gonna drink the water. She pass the water on to you and you father, and so on. Welcome to all you all Buxtonians. You all cannot say Dr. Haynes not paying attention to you all tonight. You all have an all Buxtonian cast tonight. All right? So please, you all don't abuse me out and say, me getting racial. But when villagers tell you getting racial, they put their own meaning to racial. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. It just means that you strain from your roots. A little bit of culture there tonight. And remember, we are not, I am not, Colin is not, and you are not Negroes. You are an African people, proud as the tree the axeman cannot tumble. I'm borrowing there from our national poet Martin Carter. Colin, you went very early from HIV to mental health. And, as a professor, when I hear things like that, I just light up. because you said, but there's a bright by. He's making linkages, or what the younger scholars call intersections. Oh, rant. You hear me? Big word tonight. Intersection. All right. When you with young bright people, you all know I just gush when I get young bright people come on to my program because it making the load lighter because them young people, they shoulder broad and strong. And I want more to come through. You made the linkage between HIV and mental health. We are now patently, fully aware that mental health is a real problem in the world, but a problem in Guyana. Where are we now in terms of ranking in the world? Number two, in
Yeah,
terms of mental health?
in terms of suicide. So, with mental health, I was on a show a few weeks ago, and even doing some research,
Yes.
I noticed that when we're talking about mental health, everybody thinks that suicide is the end of is all mental health, just only mental health. But mental health also is depression. It's also
Uh-huh.
anxiety. Now
Yeah.
listen, every time I gotta go to Georgetown and drive in that traffic, my mental health is also affected. Because when you see that traffic backed up and people driving around you and cutting you off and all of that, it gives you anxiety. So one of the things I noticed earlier is, look, we're the fastest growing economy in the world. We're developing more. There's more buildings, there's more cars, there's more infrastructure, there's more of everything, but we're not really taking care of our mental health, right?
Mhm.
Now there's more anxiety than anything else, like I said, because now you got more cars in Georgetown, you got more traffic, you got more people, you've got so many more things affecting you, and so many constraints on the human being. And so it's important that we first understand that there is multiple types of mental health. So you've got depression, you've got anxiety, you've got some people get loneliness, some people get um, hopelessness. That's another one. Now, the combination of all of these together formulates into the end. At sometimes some people can't cope with it very well. That now becomes suicidal, right? When you can't deal with losing somebody, you can't deal with losing a job, you can't see your way. You have stories that the girlfriend left you. Yeah, you want to be with the girl, and the girl didn't want or your family don't want to be with you and all of that. And then there is a problem, and then that catapults into suicide. So for suicide, which is the worst case scenario, um, you know, we don't have the latest data. See, the data in Guyana is one of the biggest challenges and worry for me. And that's why I don't think we'll do very well with strengthening our healthcare system. Because Dr. Haynes, in terms of strengthening institutions, as you're a university professor, data is important. Now, the data resides one place. The data is never disseminated. It's somewhere at the ministry, between somewhere, Lock and Key, wherever. But we need to have that data. The data from 4 or 5 years ago said we're number two, right? I've been to the top three suicide places in the world, right? They happen to be in the same area, South Africa. And in South Africa, there's two countries, Lesotho and Eswatini.
Mhm.
And um those are two kingdoms within the bigger country of South Africa, right? I've been to Eswatini. It has one of the lowest life expectancies in the world. Matter of fact, if you get to 60 there, they got to show you a big party, because most people don't live to see 60 there, right? Lesotho is a very dangerous case. I mean, uh, how we measure suicide is for every 100,000 people. So think of every 100,000 people in Guyana, right? In Lesotho, it's 72 or 73, somewhere along that borderline, 72, I think. For Guyana, it's 40, 41. So if you multiply that by a population of almost 800,000, you almost have almost 320 suicides happening a year. Now, this is not necessarily that that might be the case, but we don't know because
Mhm.
most of the suicide goes unreported. Remember, only a year ago, suicide was a crime in Guyana. So you commit suicide, your family don't want to tell the police, you could get locked up. You think if you attempted suicide, you can go to jail. So one of the good things that they did is they decriminalized suicide. But oftentimes, I always am criticizing not that what we do, but how we do it, right? And did we really take into consideration all the facets of it? And so my biggest problem I have is, yes, you decriminalize it, but you don't have those supporting structures to offer support, to report, to draw data of attempted suicides and so forth. So you would hear the minister said there's 200 or 220, add 100 to that, or add 50 or how much ever to that, there's a significant amount that is not being reported.
Mr. Colin Haynes here tonight, and healthcare specialist, speaking to us about healthcare in Guyana. And of course, Guyana is part of a larger world, so we are contextualizing it. Uh, uh, Colin, I want to ask you two sensitive questions as they relate to mental health and suicide, because as you have demonstrated, there is a correlation between mental health and suicide. And the first has to do, when I was a boy growing up, and you say suicide, we used to say it's an Indian Guyanese thing. That Indian Guyanese were the ones who committed suicide, that you would hardly find African Guyanese. I didn't know what was it in relation to Amerindians, but in relation. And we would always hear that. But I am hearing from specialists now that that even if that were true back then, it's
Mhm.
not true now. Help us out in the relationship between ethnicity and mental health and suicide. Well, ethnicity and suicide.
Mhm.
Is that true, or it's no longer the case?
It's definitely no longer the case. So you see, again, we have to come back to the data. So
Mhm.
the two suicide capitals of Guyana happen to be one in Suddy and one in Blackbush Polder. Now I'm hearing that the quarantine along the quarantine coast, Blackbush Polder beyond, before Blackbush Polder, and beyond Blackbush Polder, we're having a serious issue. But in the earlier days, right, um, the highest incidence was happening in Blackbush and Suddy, right? I
Mhm.
can understand Blackbush Polar. I've been to Blackbush Polar. I've been to Saudi as well. I really can't wrap my mind around Saudi as yet, right? I've been to Saudi so many times, and I every time I go to Saudi, I go to the market, I talk to the people. I said, how can this place be so? But now in Interland, suicide is committed differently, right?
Mhm.
And it's not something is also discussed among the members of the indigenous population. They're hanging themselves, right? In the prisons, people are eating razor blades. I've met a young man who drank gasoline. In some of these agriculture area, particularly Blackbush, Poland, Saudi, there's a large access to pesticides, and so
Yes.
they're drinking the insecticides like gramazone and so forth, right? When I went to high school, I went to Mackenzie High School. One of my colleagues, not Mackenzie, yeah, Mackenzie High School, one of my colleagues committed suicide. So that also dispels the myth that it's just an Indian thing. It's a countrywide thing. In primary school, the first incident of suicide was one of my classmates as well. He committed suicide as well. So, and he was African descent, right? So, but I think, Dr. Hines, the biggest problem we're having here is it's not the population, but where does the data show us where it's happening, right? So we need to have the data to see, is suicide on the rise in Linden, Region 10? Is it on the rise in the Interland? Are we reducing in quarantine? Are we reducing in Essequibo Coast? Are they going up altogether? What is the problem happening there? And so this is where I like data myself. If you get your hands on data, you can extrapolate it, as you know, and you can see different things happening. But definitely, we're not at that point now where we're saying it's just one race anymore. It's affecting everybody because everybody's getting anxiety in the cities, in Guyana, in Buxton, all over. This is a serious problem, and it calls for, my intervention is we have to stop this way of just thinking about healthcare and healthcare institutions as a building. We like to build fancy hospitals. Politicians like to spend money, and they can open cut a ribbon and that kind of thing. But it has now to be looked at from training and education. It has to be looked at from the research component, because that's where you get the data. It tells you, so the data tells you what is going on, right? And the data tells you why this is going on, right? And now quality evaluation and so forth, quality assurance now helps you to how you're going to be able to tackle this. And so these are the three parts of institutions. You know them, even better. You're a professor at a major institution in Arizona, and that's where institutions are built on. They're built on training, education, research and development, and quality assurance, and data evaluations and so forth. So yeah, I think we really need that data now to really see what's going on across the country.
The data is very important. Our audience is a mixed audience, but it's predominantly African Guyanese, and clearly, I'm sure the audience will be interested in what the data is saying. But you're saying there really no very little data, and the data that we have is not disaggregated. Eh?
No, it's not. And we don't have institutions set up in place where we have a lot of research going on. Right now, I know that Colombia has a partnership with Guyana. And what they're doing is they're trying to now develop the mental health study across the country, which I think is a great thing. And we've had these Guyana well-being conferences, which serve as a connection to bring education and to have those case scenarios of not only in Guyana but across the world. But what we need is we need more effort into having the data available to us at a local level, so that we can get our doctors, get our public health professionals like myself who are curious to start looking at this data, start going into the fields and start finding out and asking the questions, right? Because then you're asking to, if you don't know the data or you don't have a reference point, we're just on this wild goose chase, right? We're just pulling things off a thin air. And so I think that that is something that I'd like to see more open. Now, it is always for me very interesting to see why the data is being held back. You know, the world knows that Guyana has a suicide problem. So if you held back the data, it doesn't change the fact that we were once a suicide capital of the world, and we're now still we're still in the top five of suicide capitals in the world. So open up the data. Let's see it. Let's also challenge the data, because if they're telling me in Buxton there's so much suicides, then I can go myself and verify that with research, right? And so that's where it becomes a refining thing. But oftentimes governments never do that. You know, I don't know. We have this fear of data. I don't know where it comes from.
And talking about data, we talk about ethnicity, the relationship between ethnicity and suicide. I think even without data, we can look at the social class relationship to suicide, the causal relationship between poor classes of people and suicide. But from my experience as a boy growing up in Guyana, there was a lot of mental health in the high class society, but they were able to cover it down so that you never know, you never knew. Because if you're from upper class and you have a mental health problem, you weren't roaming the streets. You went into institutions, or you were kept at home and you got to care at home. For poorer people, a lot of our mental health victims tend to roam the streets, so it's in your face. So I want you to comment on one, the relationship between social class and mental health in Guyana. But in particular, I want you to address the instance of mental health among middle class people?
Yeah, so what you saw happen in the middle class, they probably were able to suppress it a little
Mhm,
better, but
mhm,
not necessarily it's not happening, right?
mhm,
We have that case in America too. There's tons of mental issues in the lower class, but also the middle and the upper class as well. Matter of fact, I'll tell you, maybe the higher you move in terms of class, and this is not founded in data, this is just my sort of eye test here, right? Is you'll probably find greater levels of mental illness, right? Because think about this. Dr. Hines, back in the days, we were in Guyana, we were, a poorer country. We didn't have cars. We used to walk everywhere. Life was pretty simpler for us, right? We didn't have to worry about too much things. Most we had to worry is to eat. But as we move up in class and stratosphere, and we start to gain more responsibilities, you get now two houses, you got a car, you got a stuff. Now that compounding now upon you, right? It increases your worriedness, it increases your anxiety levels, and so forth, right? Now, the thing about when you're at education plays a real role, because if you're at a middle class level, you're educated, you're able to better handle those levels, right? From time to time, I could tell you almost all of us have some kind of, we struggle with anxiety, mental health, worry, something like that, but we're able to better, to cope with it. you know the other part of it is, in the lower class, you're struggling with a lot of things, but you don't have the education enough, or you're not very much aware how to deal with it or how to cope with it, as we call it, right? So you hear people say they're taking on, right? Taking on is a mental health problem, right? Because when you start taking stuff on, you're taking it on in your head, right? And as you're taking it on, it starts to cause more stress, right? Stress also leads to problems with your veins, your arteries.
mhm.
It increases. You can get ulcers. You can get so much of sicknesses from that stress, and it kills you, right? And so before you get to that, there is a mental health problem, right? So many Guyanese people, like they take on all of these different things in the lower class with the lack of knowledge to do that. In the middle class, we have that education that we're able to better manage it. The upper class as well. The upper class people as well, they may have a lot, but they can also divest or break some of that issues that they have. Because if they got an issue with, let's say, having an extra company or something, they can hire a bunch of people and take care of that, right? Now they just got to deal with the fact that they got to manage or whatever. They can hire a manager and so forth. So at a higher level, you can almost buy yourself out of this, right? But not completely, because we know you hear celebrities and all these people, they tend to they end up having a lot of mental issues. They turn to drugs to cope with them. They go through a lot of depression. I mean, we hear the greatest people. I mean, I was watching Rita Franklin's movie. She coped with she dealt with a lot of depression, mental health. Mary J. Blige, a lot of people, Tina Turner, a lot of them, right? And they've passed on now, but the problem was still there, even at the highest levels. So I think education is important. Not necessarily having formal education, that's not what I'm saying, but having the knowledge and the ability to. Today we have a cell phone, and because of that, we can go online, go on social media. We can learn a lot about mental health. We can learn how to cope with it. um, we also, I want to say that as part of the education model, we got to learn to start talking more as a people, not talking people name, not talking about people, not talking about stuff, but we got to talk about the issues we're facing. I find we're a nation that we talk about everything except what we're really going through. Americans, they tell you, a lot of Americans, why they're able to cope better with mental health is they talk it out. If they're not feeling well, they find a friend and they talk to. They
Mhm.
find a counselor, they talk to. They find a pastor and they talk to. Whether it's anger, whether it's anxiety, whether it's hopelessness, whether it's suicidal ideation, they talk about it. But we is frightened for talk because, when we talk something to one we friend are going to tell
Tell
somebody else,
somebody.
and
Matty
then
tell
the
Matty.
whole village know, we going
Yeah.
to know, the whole Buxton know what's going on with you, right? And I think we have to get to that point where we're talking, we're also confiding in each other, and we're also helping to build each other up. Because simply, if you got a little problem and you're taking on something, and a friend say, "Come and say, man, let me talk," blah, 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 blah. Don't take on this, it's going to get better, reassure them, try to ease that stress level,
Yeah.
and then you'll be fine. But we got
You'll
to
be
talk
fine.
more to people.
Yeah, Colin Haynes here, young health and healthcare consultant. He has his own company, which is always a good thing for young people owning their own businesses. It's something that we have talked about on this program and something very critical for the African Guyanese community in particular. Colin, there's a lot more we'll talk about, and I will bring you back as a regular contributor to deal with this issue of healthcare. And I see a number of people in the audience are commenting. We have some experts. We have Nicole Cole, who I know who does a lot of work in that area. She has been
She's
a
my
little bit
colleague.
shy.
I like
Yeah.
her. She's my
Yes,
friend.
yes, 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 yes. She has been a little
Uh,
shy about coming on to this program. She's in the comments. She's in the audience every single day, and I've nudged her once, and she tell me no. But I think I want to make this a regular, as my Trinidadian partners, it was a regular occurrence on Politics 101. We want to segue now into the teacher strike because, as I said in the introduction, you're not just an uh, 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 someone who is steep in the profession. You also you take an interest in politics. We are joined now by the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress, Lincoln Lewis himself from Linden via West Bobis, just as how you're from Linden via Buxton. So we now don't have 100% Buxtonian on here. We get a 20% West Bobis
yeah.
on, and they cannot accuse us anymore about of discrimination. The teacher strike. It's now almost 2 months. Given the first time around, it was 29 days, and the teachers are now back on strike. I read today that they're about to go back to the table on Monday. But your general impressions about the way the government has been handling the teacher strike, and then we'll get Lincoln to come in to talk about the demonstration that they're having tomorrow.
So I think the government has not handled this thing very good. I tell some of my friends, you cannot win going against the teachers, because not only you're going against the teachers, but you're also going against parents, right? So there seems to be this division in terms of whether we should pay the teachers from 2019 forward, and then from now, the government is saying they want to pay, from 2024 onwards, and we're all saying pay the teachers before, because from 2019 onwards, I could tell you, teachers had to teach between COVID. They had to teach, in uncertain times. They had to get their classes together. Sometimes when they was in school, teachers still, I had teachers reach out to me for, there wasn't a lot of resources, computers, printers, laptops, tablets, all these things, had to come into play to give to, you had some unfortunate kids who couldn't link to the internet, who didn't have a device and things like that. And teachers made all of these things happen. So I've suggested a very simple proposal, because apparently nobody seemed to was putting anything on the table. So what I said is this: we're making approximately, and this is probably the lowest number, at least $12 million for per day in our production. If we took 20 days and we multiply that by 12, that's about 240 million US dollars, right? And then when you replicate that over into Guyanese dollars, you got about $40 billion. And what you have there, if you spread that out, within a certain number of public servants, I did about 55,000 because that's the number I had. You have about you can pay the public service at least $80,000 a year. All right, not a year, but it's $80,000 additional a month. So what I'm saying now is that the government now can take that money and pay up the teachers up until 2024, and then pay them now that across the board for all public sector employees, the $80,000 additional. So now if you were making $80,000 or $100,000, you're now making 180. If you were making 120, you're making two. If you were 220, you're making 300,000. And why I'm saying this is that if you look at the fact that our economy is one of the fastest growing in the world, right? We have growth over 30%. The cost of living is going up exponentially. So now the IDB in the World Bank says we're 25,000 US dollars a year, right? For Guyanese people. But then the reality is not 25,000. Reality is more like 68,000. And so what we can do is bridge that gap slowly with additional money. And look, we have the money, we can afford it. We're spending money on roads and hospitals and stuff. I have no problems with that. But we have to spend money in human development.
Colin, let me bring in Lincoln here. Lincoln, there is this demonstration tomorrow. Tell us about it. Organizers, time, etc., etc. I will have to leave in a couple of minutes because I commit myself to doing a program on Jonestown. It's in the United States. That should have started at 8 o'clock. They just called me there and I asked them.
Let me just say,
take the next couple of minutes and tell us about the demonstration.
Let me just say to you that we have a picketing exercise tomorrow. And what we did is to ask the leaders of the trade unions to come out tomorrow to picket in front of the Ministry of Education, the building that houses the minister. That will start at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Between 11 to 1, we will be out there. One of the things is that this is an indication that the strike continues. And the teachers union, together with the Guyana Trade Union Congress, we are going to lock arms to move on. Apart from that strike, that picketing tomorrow. Next week, we plan to be in the streets. We stand to start the whole question of public meetings, rallies, and if possible, marches.
And the public, of course, is invited to join the demonstration tomorrow.
Right.
11 o'clock in front of the Ministry of Education on Brick Dam.
Yeah.
Right.
And I expect to see you, David.
But I certainly will be there. I will be there. There's no doubt about that. I will be there. Colin, are you still in the country?
Yes, I'm still around. I'll be there. I'll show up and support the teachers. I promised I had to do it, so I'll come and do it.
Wonderful. Lincoln, I know the teachers had colors and so on for certain days there. Any special color tomorrow?
All like you should put on a red shirt and join us. That is not PPP color, that's labor blood.
Not PPP red. The labor union
this is
red.
Labor
red.
The blood. The blood of
right.
the workers.
The blood of the workers. Lincoln, thank you very much. I know it's been short, but
thank you very much for entertaining me, man.
you normally I would go up until 8:30, but sometimes these things happen. I completely forgot until the people call me there that I have to do this program on Jonestown in the United States of America. Colin, you've made your debut. Lincoln is a regular, and with your promise, I will have you on as a regular guest to speak to issues of health and healthcare because they are very, very, very important.
It'll be my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother, countryman, Colin Haynes, who is from Linden via Buxton, as I referred to him at the beginning, Colin Haynes Barker. He's Miss Barker grandson, Miss Barker from Friendship Back Dam Side Force, and then Friendship Roadhead. Roadhead, and you all know his mother is Vesta, his sister Cheryl, and
Auntie Jackie, Auntie Marcy,
Jackie,
Auntie
and
Marcy,
Marcy, and where you big auntie name? I don't know why I forget
Auntie
because
Avril.
Auntie Avril, the good friend, and so on. And of course, Lincoln, he don't like Mary, Lincoln don't like air when we call him lady name. You see how you been here? You been here. It's the family, them Lincoln. Thank you very much, Colin. Thank you
It's
very
my
much,
pleasure.
Lincoln. And I'll see you all tomorrow on the demonstration.
See you
Thank
guys.
you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, and thank you, the audience, for staying with us a little bit cut short tonight. But duty calls in another area, and I will see those of you who are going to be on the demonstration tomorrow, and then tomorrow night we're going to have a program on that N word. That N word. We're going to have a big program tomorrow night and another one on Friday night dealing with the that N word story. We are not Negroes. We are an African people. We're an African people. See you all tomorrow night.